Hi, welcome to I Studio. It's been a long time since I've put a video together, and the reason is that I have been preparing for two shows, one a solo show at Seeger Gray Gallery in Mill Valley, and the other at Gearbox Gallery, which is a two-person show, both kind of running simultaneously, which I don't recommend. I wouldn't do it again. But I've been working really, really hard. And now I just had the opening reception for both of the shows. So I'm kind of freewheeling it now. And it's very, very different when you're painting without a deadline and you're painting at this point without a theme. I'm just doing my own thing. Like I said, kind of freewheeling it. And it's really sort of a freeing experience. I'm in Crockett today, and I have two very large paintings that I'm working back into. There are two panels. They're on canvas. Each is 60 inches by 90 inches. These were actually two panels of a triptych, which were 90 inches by 180 inches. I've already repainted one of the panels. They're not the greatest paintings in the world. At one point, I'm sure I thought they were, and now I look at them as almost underpaintings. So I will not cover them up with gesso and start with a clean slate. I'm going to work into what I have and see what I can get. It's great to have this much real estate to work with, so we'll see what happens with these paintings. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to tape the sides, dust them off because they've been in the storage rack for years. I have one on the table and I have one on the wall, and I have no idea what to expect. My rough out plan is to probably start with some stenciling and some blocking off of areas and take it from there. See what I can see. Most of my work, current work, is nature-based, and I don't think I'm going to be making any huge shifts from that. I'm going to kind of be working in the vein that I've been working in, but the thing is that I'm doing it solely for myself, which is pretty exciting. So let me change my clothes and get started. I'm going to warn you, I'm with my two studio buddies today, Bandulu and Luna, and a lot of times they get into it with each other because Bandulu's 9.5 months old, Luna's 15, and they have different agendas. One wants to be left alone, the other wants to play. So in a way, I may have to play referee here every now and then. So let's get started. Hi, I got the two canvases cleaned up, dusted, sides are taped, and I'm ready to start. This was an image in a series that I did called a bridge series. There were many, many of these large triptychs that were about bridges. And I do like the symbolic meaning of the bridge. Bridge is really interesting, and especially while we're just getting over the celebration of Dia de los Muertos. And for any of you who've seen the Disney movie Coco, I think that the significance of the bridge as a crossing from one world into another is pretty significant, pretty important. It doesn't have to be that deep. It can simply be a connection between one side and another, traveling together. It bridges a gap and brings two sides together. It can also separate two sides. So you can be on one side of the chasm or another. There's a lot of meaning to me with bridges. When my dad passed away, they were crossing over a bridge, and there was toll on the bridge. And the last thing he said was, here's the money for the toll. And so I love bridges. And I got to thinking while I was cleaning up the canvases, why don't I kind of stick with that theme? And I intend to. But just to get started, especially since I have a lot of history on this, I want to make a pattern of flowers. And that's just a way to start. As you know, the flowers can easily be buried underneath the surface. So I have a beautiful yellow paint. I'm going to start, and on this one, I'm going to paint a grid work of flowers in yellow, which again is kind of significant for the Dia de los Muertos because the marigold is a flower we associate with that. This isn't a marigold per se, but I've really been wanting to make a marigold stencil. So this is the next best thing to start with. Let's see where it goes. Sometimes what I even like to do, that was really kind of cool, I'll flip the stencil over because then I do get some exciting line work from the original stencil that was slopped up with the paint. So I like that. That's all acceptable in what I'm doing and certainly how I'm starting. I may do a lot of sanding over the surface, and perhaps these flowers will get covered entirely with paint. And if I sand back into the paint, a lot of the edges of these flowers will be raised because I am putting it on quite thick. And say if I cover this with white paint and then sand into it, we may get a series of yellow lines from the edges of the flower on the stencil. My stencils are getting a little used, they're getting a little old. It is time for me to create some new stencils. Every time you use a stencil, you're building up more material. And of course, it's going to change the outcome of the stencil, what it looks like. Pretty soon, you can almost close in all the openings on the stencil with paint, and then you get a very different mark. See, these two ran together and became almost mushy, almost a little too much for me. So you see the first one quite defined, second one not quite so defined, third one hardly any definition at all. And I may have been better off simply allowing the lines from the paint on the back of the stencil and not stenciling in the whole thing. See if I like that. It's okay. Not fabulous. Doesn't have to be at this point. Nothing has to be fabulous at this point. I'm just trying to get some work down. Get a starting point. Break the tension. Get over the fear. There's always a lot of fear with starting a piece of artwork. I think especially when you're working over something that, you know, there may be precious areas in it, and maybe I have a little fear about covering up those precious areas. But I don't want to let that fear stop me. Another thing I had to do was kind of reconfigure my tables so that I could walk around the entire surface of the painting to be able to get at it from many, many different angles. And you can see this center area is a little hard for me to stretch into. My reach isn't quite long enough. What I could do is put the brush on a stick to, give me extension. Well, it's something. I don't know what yet. Boom. But it's something. Something's happening. I want to get at least one more flower in there. This is a kind of interesting decision point here. Do I want the flower to go up so the composition goes back up, or do I want it to go down and off? And I think I'm going to go up. I've already kind of messed it up with moving that stencil around quite a bit. We'll see what happens. I'm not worried about that. I have no camera person operating the camera. I'm just relying on the little tripod, so forgive me for cutting my head off and awkward camera angles. This is a homemade job. Okay. Now I've got a very wet stencil, and what I'll do is I'll put it on a table that has plastic on the top. Hopefully the stencil won't stick to it. What I try to do if I'm in the studio is I'll try to, flip it over, move it to a new spot of the table. In my other studio with a concrete floor, sometimes I throw them down on the floor. But acrylic paint is very sticky, and sometimes your stencils will stick. You can actually lose your stencil if you're not careful. You also have the option of washing the stencil off, and that's something I generally don't do. I do have a nice sink set up here in Crockett, so sometimes I take the stencil in the sink and rinse it off, especially when they're new. But when they're getting old like this, I don't usually bother. Okay, continuing on. It's January. Most of this video was shot in November. I've been working on the painting, as you can see, but I haven't been videotaping, and Christmas, New Year's, all of that is past. I'm back in the studio doing my thing. The dogs are not with me today. I have been exercising them at the dog park, and I'm thinking of getting a third dog. A friend of my, really good friend of mine, has pugs, and her pug had puppies. So I'm supposed to go down in February and pick up a little girl, and I've got a picture of her to show you. So we'll keep up on that. So anyway, I struggled a lot with this half. The thing I like about diptychs is that they work as a very giant composition, and in this case it's 90 inches by 120 inches, but they should also work as separate panels. And this one was not working, and now it is. All that's left is the detail work. And so we're going to talk a little bit about detail work, and then I'm going to cut you loose, okay? The first thing I'm going to do is sand. This is very thick, the paint. I've worked a lot changing the composition, and you can see the underpainting, because as I'm painting and blocking off areas, covering large areas with paint, I scrape through it so I get the texture of what was beneath. To further enhance this, I'm going to sand it. I'm going to start with an 80 grit sandpaper, which is a pretty rough sandpaper. It may be too rough for the surface. I'll try it, and if it is, I'll switch over to probably a 120. Let's see what we got. This is what I was hoping for. This beautiful line work that happens when you paint over something textural, and the high part of the texture shows through as lines, and this is what I was hoping for. So I'm gonna sand into this and see where it takes me, and we may do some other kind of detail work, like this was a flower stencil, and freehand I may kind of complete the flower. I like this shape that the white is creating, and I don't really want to lose it, but it looks too much like, oh, she painted over something. So I will disguise that by extending these petals into the white. Therefore, the petals will go over the white, and the white will get pushed into the background. With me, it's all about layers. What's on top, what's in the middle, what's behind. Right now, this is coming forward. I want this to recede. Look at these beautiful lines here. And I'm starting to do the detail work. Let's see if I can show this to you. I mixed some green gold, and then I have some transparent red iron oxide also. And I kind of keep them separate in the palette, and I mix them on the palette. I have some gloss medium in there. I don't want to define these areas too much, but like I said, I want to come outside of the outline of the flower where the white meets. I don't want it to look like I've simply sanded up to an area, or excuse me, simply painted up to an area. So this detail work can go on for weeks. You can really enhance a painting with the details. You can also ruin a painting with the details. So what you're trying to get is you're trying to get a great combination between the roughness, the action of the paint, and then the fine details. So don't detail it up until you kill the action and the freshness in the painting. So I'm not going to go any further in this tape with this painting. However, if you want to see the finished product when it's done, I'll have it photographed. Me and my son, Santino, we have some really exciting plans for the new year as far as the art and the online teaching goes. I'm not going to tell you any more than that at this point. It may take us the better part of the year to figure it out. Let's just say for anyone who isn't local in California and it's hard for you to get to my classes, we're going to make it easier for you. Okay? So, painting is a practice, and practice makes perfect. Please go to your studio, practice, practice, practice. Sometimes I have no idea where I'm going, but I always get there, always wind up somewhere. And when I'm truly excited about the piece, that's when I know I can stop and move on to my next piece. Have a great new year, and we will be back with some exciting teaching. Okay? Bye.